Welcome, Golden Bear parents, supporters, family members, community. My name is Sylvia Marquez. I use she, her, ella pronouns. And on behalf of the Financial Aid and Scholarships Office, welcome. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I want to cover some financial aid information and help you understand how it plays into billing and what happens to your aid to guide you as you guide your student through the next few processes as we get into the start of the fall semester. So I hope you find this information useful. We have a lot of information for you today. So I want to share my screen and start with the presentation. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off my camera so that we can see the whole presentation and then go ahead and get started. So what I want to talk to you about today is general information. So some of the fine print that I do need to share with you. We'll talk a bit about Cal Central navigation and what that means. We'll talk about the cost of attendance. We'll tie all of that together with how aid actually works. What do we do with it now that we've awarded it and you've enrolled, your student has enrolled and taken care of all of their tasks? What happens next? We'll talk a little bit about loans and spending. We've talked about them before in our previous videos and at some of our outreach events. And now I want to talk to you about them in the sense of, do you need them? How much do you need? And if you don't use them, what are the alternatives? I want to share some frequently asked questions that we get around this time of the year, some online resources so that you can work with your student to find some of this information online yourself and do some self-service instead of potentially waiting on a phone call or waiting in line or submitting a ticket. We do have resources available. And then I want to talk through quickly just some important dates and then how you contact us. So let's get started. First thing I want to cover is a little bit of fine print. So how do you apply for financial aid? It's more than anything from this slide. I want to just remind folks that you apply for financial aid every year. So you've done it for the upcoming year, the 21-22 academic year. And these are the terms that are covered by that application here on the right side. So fall 2021, which we're about to start, spring 2022, if you have a student that is starting in that term. And then next summer 2022, those terms are the terms covered by the current aid application that you and your student might have just completed. It uses 2019 tax information. And if you haven't applied yet, you still have some time to do that. I encourage you to do it sooner rather than later because there may be additional things that we require. And then for future academic years, so starting in October of this year, in a few months, the application for the next academic year is going to become available. We encourage you and your student to take care of that as early as possible. So if it becomes available in October, certainly you can start that early. If you want to start during the break between the two semesters, we strongly encourage that. And then these are the terms that are covered by that next application, and it will use 2020 tax information. So again, this is general information, just good to know. Keep this in the back of your mind as you are going through the aid process. So next, I want to talk a bit about the estimated cost of attendance for a couple of reasons. One is that you may remember from previous videos, if you joined us or other events, that this is the basis for how we award financial aid, really how much and the types. And a couple of key things about what I'm showing you here is this is assuming an in-state student. If we have out-of-state students and families, and the student has been deemed an out-of-state resident, then these totals, you'd add on another $29,754 to the total. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to point out that, you know, at the top here, there are three things listed in blue that are the things that we would bill the student directly for. And note that I said we bill the student, not the parent or spouse or other supporter that might be guiding the student through this process. Tuition and fees are at the top here, and those are the most current fees that we have. I don't expect any changes to that, but there's always fine print that you should go to the website to get the most up-to-date figures. These are from the website as of today. Room and board, these are estimates for what we think it could cost for living in a residence hall for 1 year, or an on-campus apartment for 1 year, meaning fall and spring, 9 months, or living off campus. And then we have built-in expenses for food, books, supplies, personal, and then health insurance. So health insurance is required on our campus. So you either have yours that provides the same level of coverage, if not better, than what the university offers, which is the student health insurance plan, also known as SHIP. And this is the cost for SHIP if you don't waive out. And so I just want to make those things clear, and a few things that are important about the cost of attendance as we are approaching the start of the fall semester. And we do this at the start of each semester, but specifically because we are approaching the start of the fall semester, we do coordinate which students are going to be living in a residence hall and which students are going to be in a non-campus apartment or at family housing with our partners at Cal Housing. So they do let us know who's going to be living where, so that we can provide the right type of budget and ultimately the right amount of financial aid, right? Because depending on where you live impacts the total amount of aid that you can have, which is guided by these numbers here and the cost of attendance. We do the same kind of partnering with our colleagues over at the University Health Services. So we know who is enrolled in our SHIP health insurance plan and who is not. And that matters for dependent undergraduate students specifically. If you are a dependent student and you enroll in SHIP, great, then we will add additional financial aid to help cover that expense. If you are a dependent undergraduate and you waive out a SHIP, then we will put in a waiver to represent that that expense was waived by University Health Services. So for independent students, both graduate and undergraduate, waiving out a SHIP does not change the amount of financial aid that you are receiving. So a couple of things to note there, and that's why I wanted to start with the cost of attendance. So if you have gone through the process and you have your financial aid, which we'll cover a little bit more in detail in a moment, but you see some changes to your aid, it could be because there were differences in the housing type that you reported to us on your aid application or via Cal Central. And so we corrected for that. Or we might have gotten information about health insurance and you are either enrolled in the program or you're not. So those are the two most common reasons that your budget and your financial aid can change at the start of each semester. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time talking about my finances in Cal Central. So I am going to make an assumption here that most of you and your student have seen Cal Central and have seen financial aid in Cal Central. If you haven't, this is the web address here at the bottom. You would click on My Finances. The student has access. They would have to grant delegate access to someone else like yourself if they want you to see this information. But it's in My Finances. We would go to View Awards to look at financial aid. Note that there is a drop down here if there are multiple aid years for your student. So if they're enrolled in summer right now and applied for financial aid, there would be a drop down here to show them the 2020-2021 academic year versus the fall, which starts in 21-22 academic year. You will also see any incomplete tasks that the student may have would be listed here in addition to their dashboard, but we do remind them here as well. Delegate access. Again, if your student would like for you to be able to see this information, this is one place where they can start that process to delegate access to you. We strongly encourage all of our students who are receiving financial aid that might receive a refund at any point in time that they are enrolled with us to sign up for direct deposit so that we can return any funding that they are eligible for once their charges are paid to them directly into their bank account. Otherwise, we are mailing checks to students in refunds, and that just takes more time, which can be a little bit stressful if students are in need of funding. So we do encourage all of our students to sign up for direct deposit, and that information is found here. And then one other thing I do want to mention, I'll mention the date later, is we do have an emergency loan. So if students have this expense that suddenly pops up and they weren't expecting it at some point during the academic year, we do allow for an emergency loan. There are limits to the amounts. We encourage you and your student to understand and read about what is available to you, to the student. There's no interest on it. There's no processing fee. And they do apply for it online via Cal Central. It's due in 60 days from the date that it is approved for the student. So that's good to know. And the link here, this is to actually apply. This is just for more information on our website. So you've got a little bit of information on how to navigate the landing page for My Finances. We'll come back to the billing side a little bit later. And I do encourage you to watch the video from my partners over at Billing and Payment Services, because they also did a video to guide you through this process. What I will do after we've talked a little bit more about the aid is I will help tie together the aid process to the billing process. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on View Awards and get to the next screen. And here's where we land. So again, I'm going to make an assumption that many of you have already seen this. A few things to point out in the communication section. This is where any tasks that the student needs to complete would show up in relation to financial aid specifically. This is just general good information down in the profile to let you know about what we know about residency. We don't determine it, but we do display the information that we have from the registrar's office as well as SHIP information. So good information to know down here. In the center here is the estimated cost of attendance, which we started with a few minutes ago. One thing I strongly encourage all students to do, and parents and family and supporters, is look at the cost of attendance by semester. And you do that by clicking on this view term amount. And what it will do is it will display these annual amounts by semester. So it would say fall, spring, and summer by the time we get to next summer. But it just gives you a sense of what expenses are attributed to which semester. There could be some expenses that only apply to one term and not the other. And so it's always good to get a sense of how that might actually play out. And a perfect example of that is, as new students, you are participating in Golden Bear orientation. And there is an expense associated with that program. And so that expense is only charged in the fall semester. And so in this scenario, you would see an item for Golden Bear orientation just in the one term. So those are all good things to note as you are looking at your cost of attendance by term. Below that is housing. And this gives you a sense of what is the current information that we have for the student. And this information either came from the aid application or it came from the student indicating this to us on the housing, not the housing application, I'm sorry, the aid application, so many applications, the aid application, the FAFSA and or the DREAMAT application asks the student to indicate what their intended living arrangements are. Depending where we are on the time of year, the student may still have the option of updating it here. They don't need to go update the application. Updating it here will update it for us. We do turn that function off right before the start of the semester because it changes the financial aid, right? Because it will change the cost of attendance and the total amount, which then impacts the amount of financial aid that we award a student. So we will turn it off at some point, but just know that whatever's reflected here is what we are using to calculate the financial aid a student is eligible for. And then this last area over on the right is where we display award information. Similar to the cost of attendance where you can view by term, you can view your award amounts by term as well. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But again, I do encourage students to take a look at this. So in case there is an award that you are only receiving in one semester and not the other, this is where you would see the difference because these amounts are the total annual amounts that the student is receiving. Whereas on the term side, you'll get to see the fall amount versus the spring amount versus the summer amount. that a student might be receiving. It's super helpful in terms of creating a budget and a plan for what you might owe as you move forward. And then how we award financial aid, we always list the best type of aid at the top in terms of gift aid and then work our way down. So the free money at the top, work study, and then loans. Same thing with the loans. We always start with the best type of loan that you could borrow. So subsidized, where the interest is paid by the government while the student is in school. And then we work our way down to less desirable loans, which would be unsubsidized loans, which accrue interest, and then parent loans, which also accrue interest. So just keep that in mind, that the way we list things is always from most desirable to least desirable types of awards. And then one last thing on this screen is the award comparison tool. So a few minutes ago, I talked about how we might make changes right before the start of the semester if a student's housing type changes or we add in health insurance fees, right? And a waiver. And so if you're wondering, like, what changed? How do I know what changed? Because we're only displaying the most current award, right? So what changed, and what change did it have to my financial aid award amounts, for example? The way you can see that is in this award comparison tool. So if you click on this, it will take you to another screen where you have the option of choosing a different date. So if we made a change to a student's financial aid awards 2 weeks ago, that date should be listed as one of your options. And what we will do is display the awards from that day and the current awards and highlight what is different. We will also highlight other things that could be different. For example, residency could have changed. That would make a difference. And that would be highlighted as a change. If we change the housing type based on what the information we get from Cal Housing, or if the student went in and made a change to the housing type just to see what would happen, that would be highlighted as a change on that date. And then we would highlight the changes to the awards. So we try our best to make it something that everyone can consume and understand why we made certain changes. So it's always good to use the tools that are available to you to try and understand what might be different. And then for the loans, the reason I put in these question marks is we'll come back to whether you actually need to borrow, and if you do, how much do you need to borrow? Do you need to borrow the entire amount we offered you, or maybe it's just a portion of it, and you can support your student to figure out the rest of their finances or financial obligations a different way, maybe not borrowing everything. So I left question marks there, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so let's move on to the awards by term. So let's assume that I am clicking on this circle here on the view by term awards. And this is the screen that I was describing earlier. So it takes the annual amounts that we saw previously, so these amounts, and then it breaks it up by semester. And so in this scenario, you can see that the financial aid for one term is different from the other term. And that's why it's important to always take a look to see what's different. And in this scenario, the estimated new student grant is added for the fall semester and not the spring. Okay. And this is related to orientation. So again, perfect example of why you should always be looking at your awards by term in addition to your expenses by term. And so what I want to do here is, okay, so your student applied for financial aid, you supported them through that, they completed all of their tasks, and we provided a real offer of financial aid. And let's say we just made a change to the cost of attendance because the student decided to live in the residence hall, so we updated that. And so now what happens? What do we do with the financial aid now that we're getting closer to fall? So here's how this works. We would take a student's financial aid, anything that is ready to pay out, and 10 days before the start of the semester, we would take that fall portion of the financial aid. So we pay out one semester at a time. We pay out anything that is ready to disperse. So if it's a loan and the student's done the promissory notes and the entrance counseling, we'll take that as well. In this example, what I'm going to do is only focus on the gift aid. And let's say the student has not accepted their loans yet. And so what we would do is we're going to take the fall portion of the financial aid and we're going to apply it to charges for the fall semester. So things like tuition and campus fees, health insurance, housing, those sorts of things. We're going to take this financial aid and directly transfer it to the student account to start to pay down those bills. Okay, we do that with gift aid. We get a lot of questions about how work study works. So work study is something the student has to earn, meaning that they would need to find a job, they would need to work those hours and get paid on the employer's payment schedule. So in this scenario, we are not taking, and we would not ever take work study and credit that to a student's account. Okay, so I want to put that out there and make that really, really clear. And then again, let's assume the loans are still a question and we're not sure whether this student needs to borrow yet. Okay, so we're going to take this $14,619, and what we would do with that is we would take it and then apply it to the bill. So what does that actually mean? So let's back up to the My Finances page. And instead of going to view awards, this time, let's go to view transactions. Okay, just so you know, there is a button here for making a payment. I just want to point that out. But I want to spend my time talking about viewing transactions and how you as a parent or family member or supporter can guide the student through tying together financial aid and then what happens on the billing side with our counterparts over in billing. Okay, so let's assume we click on view transactions. And this is likely what you're going to see is the show all screen for all terms. What you can do is navigate through these different tabs if you prefer to only see the unpaid balance, because what you'll see here is some of these items are already paid. Some of these are credits. So let's say you only want to see the unpaid. You can do that by going to the unpaid balance, which would be these things here that are not paid yet, but not due yet. Or we can go to the payments and aid tab if you want to see specifically how the awards are applied or how they're used to pay off these charges. Okay, so in this example, what I'm going to do, because we haven't dispersed fall financial aid yet, I want to show you what it would look like for summer for this scenario. Okay, so next we're going to go to the payments and aid tab, and I went to summer 2021 in this example. And this example for OSCE, our mascots account, we awarded OSCE a summer fee grant because OSCE is enrolled in summer, and anything that has a drop down arrow here will have the ability, you'll have the ability to expand and see more information. If we had closed this, it would look like this, and just one line and the little arrow would be down. But if I open it up and click on it, it gives me a whole lot more information here. It gives me the details of the award, like when it was awarded, if the award has increased or decreased at any point in time. That information is listed in the details. In this scenario, though, I want to look at the charges paid because I want to know exactly what was done with the summer fee grant that OSCE was awarded, right? So I can click on the charges paid tab. These are two separate tabs. Click on this one, and it will show me exactly which charges were paid by this particular award. The same thing would apply if you made a payment or the student made a payment. You could click on that payment amount, open it up, look at charges paid, and it would show you exactly what that award, that payment was applied to. So this is just a good way to connect all the dots. We take the financial aid, we apply it to the charges on the account, and you can see exactly how each award was utilized and what it paid. So that, I hope that is useful information, because we had a lot of questions about, do you take all the financial aid and give it to the student, then the student makes a payment for tuition and housing, and that's not the case. What we do is take all the financial aid, apply to tuition, and then housing gets charged in 5 payments. So if you're in a residence hall, for example, and so you would have an August, September, October, November, December housing charge for the first semester. And what we do with financial aid is first pay off tuition and fees. If you have a health insurance award, we pay off that health insurance charge. And then we take any money that's left after tuition is paid in full, and we start to pay the housing. So we would pay August, we would pay September if there's still money, we would pay October if there's still money left over. And we keep going down every month until we hopefully can pay off the entire semester of housing. And so that's how this works. And you can follow each award to see which charge was paid off by that particular award. So we did that, we took the grant. Was it enough to cover all of OSCE's charges for fall? Well, this is where I would encourage OSCE to do a little bit of math. On our website, and this is the link here, we have a worksheet for you to be able to calculate what you could either expect as a refund or what the student can expect as existing charges for the fall semester. So the first thing is you want to add up all the charges the student may have for the fall semester. So tuition, campus fees, health insurance, housing for each month, and drop that into this part of the spreadsheet. And then the second part of this document, you want to add in all of the awards from the fall semester that are ready to pay out. You subtract the two, and that gives you an idea of, are there still charges that are outstanding for the fall semester? Or is there the potential for a student to receive a refund because all of the aid that they have exceeds the charges that they have? And so that is one helpful way to put all the pieces together and then figure out, do I have enough without borrowing? And if you don't, if the student is going to still owe the university for the fall semester, then it's important to make sure that you are thinking about how the student is going to cover the rest of the charges, plus anything else that they may need money for, like books, like food if they want to eat outside of their meal plan at the dorm, any personal items that they might need throughout the year. So this is where the loan question comes in, and doing this kind of math can be helpful. And so I want to go back just for a moment to talk a little bit about student loans, right? So doing that math will help you determine, do you need to borrow, or do you have other alternatives? And B, if you do need to borrow, how much might you need to borrow? And then it gives you a sense of, do you even need to, how much? But then you want to start looking at the types of loans that you've been offered, right? So subsidized loans, the interest is paid by the Department of Education or the state or the university, depending on the type of loan that you have. This is the interest rate for federal loans for any loan that's dispersed after July 1 of 2021, so right now. And this is the amount until June 30th of next year. And then this is the rate for unsubsidized loans for undergraduates and graduates. And then Parent Plus loans, this would be the interest rate on those loans. So it's always good to do a little bit of research to understand the interest rates and know that loans, if you utilize them, you are borrowing them usually with interest at some point in time, right? And so if you wanted to look at federal interest rates, this is the link to be able to do that. We like to talk about loans as your safety net. So borrow only what you absolutely need. We're going to offer you as much, the maximum that you're eligible for. It doesn't mean that that's what you need to borrow. It is simply there in case it is needed. And then there would be additional requirements if a student or a parent is going to borrow a loan, promissory notes, applications, those sorts of things. All of that can be handled on the federal side at studentaid.gov. So you've done the math, you know how your aid paid, you've done the math. Here are some options for loans. We do get lots of students and families who are not interested or have other resources to pay for their expenses, which is great. We don't encourage borrowing if you don't need it. But then we do encourage you to create a spending plan. Figure out how much you're going to need each semester. So that worksheet can come in really handy to help the student and you as a supporter understand what might be needed each term. And then, are there alternatives to borrowing? is a student working now? Has money been saved? Do they have outside scholarships, which we strongly encourage our students to research and use? Can work study help them with some of those smaller expenses, those personal expenses they may have during the academic year if they need to go buy hygiene items or eat outside the dorm, just a few times, or buy coffee outside the dorm, those sorts of things. So what are those alternatives, and can those be used to help fund those expenses that the student may have? And then are there other ways for a student to reduce their spending, right? Don't eat out very often. Cook in the room, or use your meal plan wisely. Those sorts of things. How can we bring down spending? So there are ways to do that. We have some resources ourselves. We have peer mentors that can guide students in creating a spending plan and doing some of this. They are called Bears for Financial Success. You can find them on our website, which I will highlight in a later screen, but I do want you to know that we can do this on a peer-to-peer basis, so student to student, to guide students through this process. We also have online tools to guide students through this as well. On our website, we have a tool called iGrad, and it's a personal finance tool. So it can guide students through things right from the start, like creating a spending plan, all the way through their financial lifespan, and go into buying a home, retirement, all those sorts of things. It's a fantastic tool that we have available to all students for free on our website. I strongly encourage you to guide your student to use this tool. You may want to look at it with them. Lots of super helpful things for all of us to learn from this tool. And then I want to go back just a bit. So you know how aid works. We've tied it together to billing. You have a tool for talking through whether you need to borrow, which types of loans to borrow, borrowing only what you need if you absolutely need it. I do want to go back to how aid actually behaves, because I think that in the first semester, it's pretty straightforward. Fall financial aid pays fall charges. That's pretty straight line. But it looks a little bit different when we get to the second semester in spring. And so I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of how it works, so you're prepared for the next academic term. Here we go. So how financial aid would work for this 21-22 academic year. And again, remember, the 21-22 academic year is fall 2021, spring 2022, and summer 2022. So next summer, okay? So this gives you a sense. So fall 2021 financial aid pays fall, right? And we always pay the oldest charges first. Regardless of which term we're talking about, it always pays the oldest charges first. And then for spring 2022, so fall was fantastic. The student did great. And we get through December, and January classes start again. And 10 days before classes start is when financial aid gets dispersed, regardless of the term. It's always 10 days before instruction begins. So we get to January, and your spring 2022, the student's financial aid is ready to pay out. What is it going to pay first? The natural assumption is that it's going to pay spring 22 charges first, and that is not true. So what ends up happening is for spring 22, that financial aid is going to pay the oldest charges from the fall semester first. So if there are any outstanding charges from fall, the spring financial aid will go backward to the prior term in the same academic year and pay those charges first. Then it will be applied to the oldest charges in the spring 2022 term. And when I say the oldest charges, I'm talking about the due date. So every item on the student's billing account will have a due date associated with it. So we will go to the oldest first, okay? So fall pays fall, spring pays fall, then spring. If there are no charges for fall, great. It will just apply to spring directly. Same idea for summer. It will go backward to the oldest charges from the fall semester, then it'll go to spring, and then it will pay the summer charges. It's important to know that this is how the vast majority of our financial aid awards behave, because oftentimes, like I said, folks assume that spring aid will only pay spring charges, and that's not true. And summer will only pay summer, and that's not how it works. It goes backwards to the oldest charges in the same academic year in this order. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. That's a lot of information. It's just good information to have so you're prepared for future terms. Okay. And then one note that I have here at the bottom. So financial aid for the current academic year, this academic year, will not apply to charges from a prior or a future academic year. So some of our students right now and parents and family members and supporters, some of the students that you are here to support may be enrolled in summer session right now. They may be in summer bridge, they may be in the transfer TPP program, or in summer or freshman edge or transfer edge. And so if you are in one of those programs, you should not expect your fall financial aid to pay the charges, if there are any, from the summer 2021, because that is a prior academic year. So fall aid will not go backwards to summer. So it's just important to know that. And that's really why I put this note here, was just to point that out. I know a lot of times students assume that their fall financial aid will just pay off summer. Summer does need to be paid off. It is separate. And so it's always important that students are monitoring their bill and their financial aid for both academic years if they do decide to start in the summertime. Okay. Some frequently asked questions. So I thought I would take all this information and just put out some questions that we get often from our parents and supporters. So first question we just went through, which was, will my fall 2021 financial aid pay my summer charges? No. Fall financial aid will not go backward to a prior year. So keep that in mind. Monitor those summer financial aid awards and monitor those summer bills, because they will need to be taken care of separate from fall. Does fall 2021 financial aid pay fall charges? Yes, it will go toward those fall charges. We'll talk a little bit about some exceptions, because in financial aid, there are always exceptions. Does my fall 2021 financial aid pay spring charges? Fall will not go forward to spring. So keep that in mind. Spring can go backwards to fall, but fall will not go forward to spring. So keep those things in mind. And it's important to know that if a fall award pays out really late, often students think that financial aid will then just get used to pay their spring charges. And it doesn't work that way. If there are no other fall charges, then the student's going to get a refund. And they should hang on to that money if they need it to help pay for spring charges. That would be up to them to do. So it's a little tricky. It's a lot of information, but that really is the reason that I put up this graphic, so that you can see how fall will go, or how aid pays in each term and how it behaves. Okay. Are there exceptions to these? Yes. So some of our students get awards from their department, or from programs like EOP. Sometimes those awards are set up in a way that they don't pay the charges. Instead, they want that money to go directly to the student. So in those cases, there are exceptions where some awards will go directly to the student and bypass the charges. The charges on the account are still the student responsibility. It's just good to know that while this is what we anticipate your aid will do, and most of the time it does, there are some exceptions to this. So it's just making sure that that information is out for students and parents and family and supporters, okay? Other FAQs. So why are my awards conditional? Really only for two reasons. Either the student was selected for a financial aid verification, and they may need to complete that process, or the residency status is still pending. And our partners at the Office of the Registrar who handle residency are working as quickly as possible to get all of those determinations done as early as possible. But those are typically the two reasons that awards can be conditional. How do I buy books? How do I use financial aid to buy books? So we went through the whole scenario, right? You have fall financial aid. We take that and apply it to all your charges first. All of your charges need to be paid in full before a student will receive a refund And that refund is what would be used to purchase other items like books, supplies, personal expenses. So again, it's important to do the math, use that worksheet, and figure out, am I going to have enough to pay for all my charges and get a refund to purchase other things that I need to purchase. Generally speaking, books are not charged to the student account. The bookstore does not do that. So the student would need to have resources available to purchase books. And we encourage our students to come to campus with as much of their resources saved as possible to purchase their books. And also, this is one scenario where we encourage students to find ways to reduce their expenses, right? So is it renting books? Is it checking them out from the library, buying used books? What are those ways to do this at a more affordable cost? And then how will waiving ship impact my financial aid? Well, it all depends on whether you're a dependent or an independent student, right? I mentioned that at the beginning. It also depends on the type of aid that you are currently receiving. Rather than go into all the details here, because it really does depend on an individual case, I have put in a link to where we have SHIP FAQs and how it plays with financial aid to help guide the answer to that question. And then the vast majority of these questions can be found on our website and under How Aid Works, Newly Admitted Student FAQs. Here are some more resources available for you all and your student. I encourage you to explore them. We started with Cal Central, our financial aid office. I strongly encourage you to use our website. We just launched a new chatbot to answer a lot of these really common questions that we get. It is not live, so there's not a person behind the chat answering those questions. It is a bot, so it's artificially intelligent, but it can answer many of the most common questions that we get. So these questions that I listed on the previous slide, if you type those into the chatbot, you should be able to get an answer to those. If you don't, please report that to us because we just launched it. It is still learning, and we are still trying to support it to be as intelligent and useful as possible. And think about it this way, it is one way to get an answer to your question rather than waiting on hold on the phone or standing in line to get a question answered in person, or creating a case, which can also take more time. All of that can take more time as we get closer to the start of the semester. And we are here to welcome you in person. It does take longer. So I do encourage you to utilize these online resources to get answers to your questions and do some self-service through this process. As I said, the FAQs page is useful. This Funding Your Future, the Current Students page is particularly useful because many of the videos I mentioned earlier are on this page. So how to apply for financial aid, how to navigate Cal Central. If you are trying to understand awards and the cost of attendance, there's a video on that. If you are thinking about a family contribution appeal, there's a video on that. If you have outside scholarships and you want to know how that's going to impact your financial aid, there's a video on that and also talks a little bit about a scholarship search. If you're wondering about work study, we are currently working on a video for work study that will also be listed there because we get tons of questions about that. So that will be there. And we're also working on more videos about how aid works. So a lot of the information I gave you here, we are working on a video around that you can reference later, and a few other videos. So just useful information on this Current Students page, as well as a scholarship search. There's a parent hub. And then as your student is completing tasks, the verifymyfafsa.com website is the forms website. This applies to both FAFSA and Dream filers. Our vendor just has this website name or domain. And so just know it applies to both FAFSA and Dream filers. Last thing, or second to last thing, is the important dates for fall 2021. So I mentioned earlier, financial aid begins dispersing if the student is eligible, did all their tasks, is enrolled in at least 6 units, has everything in place that we need. The earliest financial aid begins dispersing is 10 days before instruction begins. For fall, instruction begins on August 25th. 10 days before that is August 15th. However, that is a Sunday. And so if 10 days before the classes begin falls on a weekend, then we would disperse aid on the next business day. In this scenario, our classes start August 25th. So the first disbursement where we begin dispersing for eligible students is Monday, August 16th. It's important I'll talk a little bit about how these two dates are related and hopefully ease some of the concerns that our students and families have. So that's August 16th, August 18th, the emergency loan I mentioned. These loans are available for the upcoming term, and they become available 1 week before classes begin. So in this upcoming fall, that is August 18th. I showed you where the application is available in Cal Central on the My Finances landing page. Tuition and fees are always due the Friday before classes begin. So for fall 2021, tuition and fees are due August 20th. I want to be specific that it is tuition and fees are due that day. That includes non-resident tuition. Does not include all of the housing charges, however. So again, watch the other video, listen to the information that's provided there. That should mention how to review due dates for each item the student is charged for. But for fall 2021, tuition and fees are due August 20th. So it's important to know that we began paying August 16th. That's a Monday. Tuition and fees are due that Friday. So this can create a little bit of concern for families, right? Because it's all within that same week. And so we know that you all are monitoring when fees are due. And the most common question we get is, when is my financial aid going to pay? And it's usually the week before we start to get those questions. So just know that Monday is the earliest that we begin paying. That's always our largest disbursement, right? Because it's the very first day of the fall semester. And so just keep an eye on Cal Central during that day, because aid will begin to be dispersed if the student is eligible at that time. If for some reason the student will not be joining us for the fall semester, you always want to check in with admissions and the college before you make that decision. Just know that August 24th is the last day to withdraw without being charged any tuition and fees or health insurance, okay? And then August 25th is when instruction begins for the fall 2021 term. And we know that much of this may create more questions for you. And if you can't find it online, there is a way to get in touch with us. And I want to draw one more connection for you here. So rather than coming to the financial aid and scholarships office directly, we have a one-stop office, and it is called Cal Student Central. And so our colleagues at Cal Student Central, who are amazing, they are there to answer your questions about financial aid, registration, and billing. So we're not the experts in housing. We're not the experts in academic advising. We're not an expert in rec sports or those sorts of things. We are here to support you through financial aid, registration, and billing questions specifically. So this is how you get in touch with anyone that, if you have questions about financial aid, this is how you reach us. Cal Student Central, their website is listed here under number 1. If you go to services and support, this is where you will find information on our virtual front desk. So if you have a question, our amazing work study students are supporting the virtual front desk, and they are operating it and can answer most general questions. If it's something more specific to the student, 2 things. One is make sure you have delegate access. And then the second thing is the student can put you into the right queue so that a team member from financial aid or the registrar's office can answer that question for you. You could open a case online, or you could give us a call. I do encourage you to go to this website because it will have our most recent business hours that we are open on the website. We are currently closed on Wednesdays. That will change in August. So do please look for our hours of availability on the website. As I mentioned before, the cases and the phone calls and eventually the in-person support take longer as we get closer to the start of the semester. So I do ask that you be patient with us and extend us a little bit of grace as we are trying to support all of our students and families through this process. And then the chatbot I mentioned earlier, one thing I neglected to mention then that I can mention now is that the chatbot does provide information in multiple languages. So right now it's English and Espanol, simplified Chinese and Vietnamese. And so I encourage you all to utilize this tool in the language that best supports you and your family. And then, like I said, delegate access. And I think that is all the information I have for you today. So I want to thank you for your support. Thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. On behalf of the Financial Aid and Scholarships Office, we welcome you to Berkeley. We are super excited that you're going to join us. If you have more questions, certainly you know how to get in touch with us or find the information online yourself. And we are so excited to welcome you on campus. Congratulations, welcome, and go Bears.